All right, here we are, NBA draft night, 6:37 p.m. Supposed to start at 6:30. That's all right. Adam's getting jostled around there backstage at the NBA draft, Locked On Nets style, going informal here on YouTube Live. I see a bunch of people already coming in to hang out. Adam, live from Barclays at the NBA draft. He's been there most of the day right here. Gonna have turn it over to you here. How's it going to the draft? What are you hearing? What have you been seeing backstage as things sort of get ramped up? We're less than 90 minutes before the draft starts.
Yeah, it's actually, it's been a lot of fun. Obviously, we talked about Media Day yesterday, a little bit more informal opportunity to talk to a lot of these prospects, which was cool. Today, they're all still here, but we get down to the bowels of the Barclays Center. You've got the green room. You've got the hangout for the family members. You've got the media workspace hub that's shoved off in the corner in a good way, right? Separating everybody out. We obviously haven't heard as much as we wanted to from Brooklyn Nets perspective, but in general, we're about 20 minutes away from fans really filling this place out. You can see a little bit there in the background. They just had the draft team photo happen with everybody up on the main stage there with Adam Silver. So, I mean, it's incredible, dude. Like, the Barclays Center knows how to throw a good time when it comes to some draft coverage. And now it's just a question of what do the Brooklyn Nets ultimately try to do here as we work our way towards picks 21 and 22, which, Doug, by the way, we may have walked ourselves right into the exact picks that the Nets are taking.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. The news here that came out a little bit ago, maybe within the last hour, was that the Portland had made one last offer for Mikal Bridges. It sounds like they offered the number 3 pick and Anthony Simons. Brooklyn turned it down. I don't know if there's going to be anything more than that. We still don't know who the number 3 pick's going to be. It's the odds have switched back and forth kind of all day between Scoot Henderson and Brandon Miller. And now it's back in Miller's favor with it's back to Miller's favor with Scoot, but it's really close. So either way, what are your thoughts on that? Like them turning that? Are you that surprised that they would have turned that deal down? We talked about this it's sort of at length about their feelings about Mikal. And that particular deal felt like it's been on the table for a while, though it does feel like that we're kind of getting officially that they had offered that.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it there. If that was the general idea of what we thought the Portland Trailblazers were going to be willing to offer a package for Mikal Bridges, we said long ago that was never going to be good enough. It was going to need picks. It was going to need more draft capital. It was going to need Shaedon Sharpe, right? Like, there was going to be a seismic ask on the part of the Brooklyn Nets. So the idea, as we've heard, that the final chance from Portland to maybe avoid taking a player like Scoot Henderson at 3 and then having to figure out.
Nope, I think we knew this might be a problem here. We lost Adam. He's been saying,
I'm back. Don't worry about that.
There we go.
I can't stop me. That was, by the way, a friend of the network, Jackson Gatlin, fellow network, trying to call me. Get the heck out of here. I'm doing my own thing. We knew that if you didn't get to a particular, as I flick something out of the way, if we didn't get to a particular threshold, they weren't going to do it. Now the question for Portland becomes, what happens after you take Scoot Henderson? Because that's what's going to happen, we think. We say it's jockeying between him and Miller. But if you take Scoot Henderson, you're going to end up with Damian Lillard saying, hey, it's time to move on. That's what the impression has been around the NBA. The question becomes, what are the packages they can get after that? And they can always try to do it after the draft is done or later in the first round, potentially.
For sure. We've always said that deal was going to have to be significantly better for Bridges in order to really, it was going to have, it was the deal for Bridges was always probably going to be more than any team wanted to pay. Right. And for the Nets to be willing to accept it. And because it's probably more than whatever is reasonable around what his value is in the NBA, because I think at this point he just means more to the Nets than he's going to mean to other teams. I think that's just where Bridges sort of lives in terms of face of the franchise stuff. The Nets have worked overtime this summer, rightfully so, to make him the face of the franchise, going to Liberty games, been doing the circuit. He's already got he's got a signing here in the city for some stuff going in over the summer where he's it was already part of the promotional thing that was like Brooklyn net Mikal Bridges. Like, they're not trading him, right? It's just like, it was just going to have to be so out of the water, and the other teams aren't going to want to do that stuff. Like, there's, and it's probably correct on their part, right? Like,
would you have done it? Would you have done it if you were the Brooklyn Nets on that offer?
It's super close. I think I'd rather, if I can't guarantee that it's going to be Scoot, it gets a little harder, I think, right? Like, I think that's where it gets a little dicey for me, is that you just don't know, because it keeps going back and forth. Not because I don't think I'd want to do it for Brandon Miller. But if it was Scoot Henderson, who could probably, right now face of the franchise, could probably start stepping in as a young guy. But you just don't know, though, because it's the 3rd pick and not the 2nd. And right now, because again, these odds have flipped I mean, massively all day long. It was like
Right.
a lock that Miller was going at 2. Then Shams reports earlier that it's going to be Charlotte is going to go with Scoot, and then it's already flipped back to Miller. So like, no, it's, I think we might go down to the absolute wire with that pick, not knowing who's going to be a 2 or 3. I don't know if you're hearing anything from a bunch of different people that are walking around. I know you're hanging out with Rockets guys there because Jackson's there, and they're probably going to take Amon. But I don't know like what the buzz is in and around Barclays.
No, and I think maybe the only difference there is you mentioned about being their pick 2 or pick 3. Now, how the Nets think about it, I think it's off the table for them if that's the basis of it, even if it was Miller or it was Scoot too, right? And it opened it up for them. But by and large, it doesn't seem like, we all know Wembanyama at number 1, but there doesn't seem to be any definitive consensus around the direction that they're going to go, short of most of the buzz, as your fans are talking about, is about Michael Jordan on his way out the door, still having some input around what Charlotte does. So inevitably, whoever it is at 2, it's going to be the wrong guy. No matter which way they went, it's going to be a problem. And then beyond that, there's still this shakeup as you move towards 10, and a lot of teams talking about what are the trade-out possibilities for some of them. We had mentioned yesterday about Atlanta and some of those team numbers that want to move up. And then the other thing was Toronto. That came out earlier today that they had at least reached out to Brooklyn to have discussions around the 13th pick. I think that becomes interesting when we start to talk about Dorian Finney-Smith, when we talk about Royce O'Neal. Which way is Toronto trying to send themselves? Recalibrating and staying competitive, or are they considering the idea of really rebuilding themselves?
Yeah, so a lot on the table here. I suspect we're still going to see some movement during the draft. I mean, this is projected to be a very, very fluid draft. Like there's still teams that could perform trades. Like obviously, Chris Paul got traded for Jordan Poole today. Like these are things that we're just kind of a little bit to some degree glossing over. Massive move. We'll discuss that on later podcasts. I think not as Nets relevant that particular one, but it just shows you the amount of fluidity that's happening in the NBA right now, sort of at unprecedented levels, right? Like we're in the last 96 hours, Bradley Beal's gotten traded, Kristaps Porzingis has gotten traded, Chris Paul's gotten traded, Jordan Poole's gotten traded, and and just a bunch of other minor guys. And we're not done yet. There's still lots of rumors kind of hanging around for where different teams are going to go. I think, and by the way, and we'll get into some of the Nets draft stuff here in a second, but I think that's important to remember. Like, it wouldn't shock me for anything to happen here. If they packaged the 2 picks and got moved up in the first round, if they got a first round pick somewhere late for Dorian Finney-Smith or Royce O'Neal, that wouldn't shock me. The Nets could be looking at an extra draft pick in this draft before it's all said and done. I don't know if it's likely, but I think it's possible. And so, the Nets could have 1 pick here. The Nets could have 3 picks here. I think it's all kinds of different stuff that can be happening. I did want to talk a little bit about let's just right now, because we'll be coming at you in the entire evening. We'll be coming here after the Nets pick. We'll be doing a full podcast episode after. Might be a solo job for me, depending on what Adam's status is backstage. We'll kind of see how that ends up going. But in terms of what we're going to just talk about now as we roll through live, we'll probably go through maybe 7 o'clock, 7:15, something like that. About what guys could land in the Nets range right now. It's still, again, it's all over the place. Looked at tons of mock drafts, did tons of speculation, tons of research. There's nowhere near consensus around what the Nets are going to do at 21 and 22 here. Before we go through some of these guys, what's your gut say right now about if they were to pick 21, 22? Like, do you have a strong feeling one way or the other about what they could end up landing on here?
I do think maybe, we said, did we stumble into it with Brendan last night talking about Podziemski? I'm going to lose it. And him maybe just being available there and seeming to have some traction. The interesting part about him, even though the odds tell you that that's going to be maybe the favorite in one of these 2 spots, the reality of looking at some of the other prospects that drift back later into the first round, you talk about maybe trade up scenarios involving Dorian Finney-Smith, maybe sitting there and getting a later first round pick. I don't know if he represents the total value at 21 or 22 that you might be able to get relatively if you jump back into the next round after making a trade up for a particular player. I know that my guy Prosper was actually nailed dead on by Bleacher Report when they put out theirs, 21. That's where he's going to go. I'm mildly concerned that he's going to go a little bit sooner. So I don't have an inclination shy of saying, if you liked the way Keontae George talked at his media day sessions, if you felt confident about the way he self-evaluated his game and knowing what he needs to expand on, that's obviously a guard. That's obviously something the Brooklyn Nets need. And the big difference to me here, unfortunately, I I'm not going to tell you that I know something that I don't. The big difference to me here is that unlike all these trade-up scenarios we talk about, if you're at 21 and 22, remember we said the guard opportunities there don't feel as strong as if you get up the board. So I find it very interesting if the Brooklyn Nets sit there, do what you say, best player available, you may find yourself with two front court players potentially, depending on how the board goes. And I'll acknowledge, Jet Howard, were he to find his way back there, I would not be shocked if the Brooklyn Nets jumped on him in a lot of ways with the way his stock has risen coming into the draft.
Yeah, there's a group of names. I'm going to call it like 11 names that are probably in and around the area where the Nets could draft, right? That are just that either we've kind of gone through and tried to find consensus on them. It has consolidated some. I mean, this was all over the place. I would say right now, I probably should have had this number a little more prepared. Yeah, I'm going to say it's 11. No, it's about 10 guys. It's about 10 guys that are mocked to the Nets in 2 or more instances, right? Now, again, they have 2 picks, so the number will always increase a little bit, right? Because they have 2 picks in the draft. But this grouping of guys, I'm going to call it probably from numbers 17 through 28 or something like that, does feel a bit like the roulette wheel in terms of like guys that could go. They kind of just all get mixed and matched depending on who you read and who you talk to. It's a little different for where the Nets could go. I did want to run so right now, odds wise, relative odds right now, those have not changed too much from last night. Brandon Podziemski is plus 105 to go in the top 20. Relative odds put him right around 21. Olivia Maxence Prosper plus 110 to go in the top 20. That puts him right around 22. I do real quick. I never mentioned this to you, but I tweeted the other day. There is like a real difference in money about who the Nets just decide to call first. And then, so they're going back to back, but so they get 21 and 22. But in terms of the rookie scale contracts over 3 years, just who they decide to say first makes $300,000 more dollars. so it's funny because if they landed on both these picks, again, they're just going to. I mean, in reality, they would just say the names back to back. But whoever they put down first just hammers more than $250,000 more over the lifetime of a rookie contract. So. In that case, you do want to make sure it pays literally to have your name called first in these 2 guys.
And by the way, that's why I always say I like to be alphabetical when we talk about getting paid for Locked On Nets work. It just makes sense to me. And whatever the difference is, we sort that out on the back end. The 10 players, you talk about that. I think that so much of this is going to depend on not just what the Nets are thinking about doing or being able to get up the board, but also what other teams choose to do. For every team that tries to move up, for every team that tries to get out of the first round, Lakers have been talking about. They've already made other moves, getting themselves extra picks, swapping with Indiana, I believe. It opens up these little pockets and changes the dynamic of which players could potentially fall. Nick Smith Jr. got talked about now, sliding back into the 20s. That was a name that up until a week ago, you would have said, no, that's top 13 prospect here for the Brooklyn Nets, 14 maybe. You're going to have to go get him in the lottery if you want to have him, which, again, you mentioned this yesterday when we closed out our late night episode. Does it make you feel any different when you see that a guy is falling down the draft board, someone that you said, hey, maybe he's worth going to get? How does that strike you as I see whether or not this violent sound will stop behind me?
I mean, look, that's all mind games at that point. Like you try to have, we planted our flag in the sand for a few of these dudes already. There's a few guys on this list that I don't have strong opinions about, right? Like that I'm probably going to end up forming stronger opinions of on the fly. I'm fine with that. We've had a lot of names thrown at us over the last couple weeks. And it's been a little bit difficult to some degree to get a handle on the guys in this range. I think we have a good sense of like sort of who, and we're going to go through some of these names now before the draft starts. We'll kind of go yay or nay on a bunch of these dudes, but seeing a guy, it kind of depends who it is, right? Like Leonard, I'll say his name later, but like Leonard Miller kind of slipping a little bit here. I'm fine with that. I'm like, oh, does he slipped a little bit into the Nets range? That's great news, right? Because there's sometimes different reasons why a guy will slip, right? If he's slipping because the fit isn't just going to work for some of these other teams, or they don't have the timeline or stuff like that, great. Who cares? Don't really care. If they're slipping because like it's Gigi Jackson and the interviews went terrible, okay, keep slipping. Like go right on by. You know what I mean? So I think it really depends. I think it really for me depends on like sort of the functional reasoning around why someone might be slipping. And honestly, some of these picks have moved around. Like not all the teams are drafting in the same spots as originally mocked up. So that is going to shake things up too. Like there have been some moves that have been made. So okay, real quick. So let's go back. We talked about OMP. We talked about Brandon Podziemski. If those are the two names called, are we feeling okay about that? Are we getting on Locked On Nets later on in the day, later on in the evening, and victory lapping, feeling good about that with those two dudes?
Yeah, I do. And again, and by the way, somebody pointed out over on YouTube when we talked about them last night, saying, "Hey, making that Joe Harris comparison is really selling a guy like Brendan Short." And I wanted to clarify, like again, it was a little tongue in cheek around, boy, a 3-point shooter. That's not quite all that we need here. He's more athletic. He has more defensive value. There's some things you want to see him build and continue to grow, but he's probably a guy that can carve out a role for himself with that perimeter shooting alone coming in the door. Again, we know the Nets front court, especially I think on my premise has always been Dorian Finney-Smith is probably going out the door here one way or the other. It's $13 million on the books. You want to clear that money off the cap as well. So when you look at a guy like Prosper, who I think has a lot of these upside trends and can give you at least a nice baseline coming in the door, again, I think it makes sense to move the needle a little bit here, get two younger players at two positions of need. I'd be fine with it. Now, again, can you tell me that player X fell and the Nets chose not to take him with one of those two picks? That might change my opinion, but I'm as high on Omax Prosper as I've been on any of the prospects, specifically in that 21-22 range. I don't see a downside to taking either one of these players at that spot.
Yeah, okay. So I think we're on the same page there. And by the way, with Podziemski too, I mentioned this on the podcast yesterday, and I was just going to reiterate, like the rebounding numbers. I know it's Santa Clara, who, by the way, Jalen Williams, OKC, Jalen Williams came out of Santa Clara last year. So I don't, we can do one for one on the schools if we're going to worry about, who the competition was going to be. Rebounding like that, it means you have a nose for it. 9 rebounds when you're 6'5", 9 rebounds a game at the D1 level when you're 6'5" means you have a nose for rebounding. And I did a little more research into this today, just reading some draft stuff around him, around whether people thought that was translatable to the NBA level. And there seemed to be moderate consensus that it was, just because of the understanding the angles, right? Like if you understand the angles around rebounding and you just have a preternatural sense for some of that, is it going to be like a 9 rebound a guy game at the NBA? No. NBA level? No. But I think it's pretty clear that there are guys in this like mold who can rebound the ball decently as like sort of off ball guards. Tyler Hero's a pretty good rebounder, right? Like yep. Tyler Hero, he's this 5 rebound the game guy at 6'5", 195, right? We talked about Josh Hart as being a good rebounder. So I do think sometimes those things will translate. All right, let me roll through a couple of these other guys. I'm going to go yay or nay around some of these other dudes that are kind of mocked into, I would call it around the range that the Nets are going to pick. Not 100%. We can see some of these guys slip. We can see dudes kind of maybe climb a little bit too. So I don't know. This list will be far from perfect, but we'll go a little bit by odds and a little bit by mock draft kind of stuff. Keontae George, if he fell to the Nets at 21, how are we feeling about a Keontae George pick?
You know what I came to the conclusion on him about, and we related this back to Cam Thomas. So quickly on him, I would say I'm not going to hold a concern that developed around Cam Thomas against Keontae George, right? And I think that you can easily draw the comparison, and you can have concerns with it. But if the Nets felt confident enough, you'd like to make the case that they, out of anyone, would know that they can do with him what maybe they were unable to do with Thomas.
Yeah, it's interesting too. And it's funny about when you have a specific kind of guy in your team, how you'll look at other guys through the same lens, right? Like, and that's not always fair to the next guy, right? Because if you can't always transcribe the faults of a player just because they might be similar, just because you have one guy that maybe has been frustrating in certain elements of the game, whereas there's like lots of other, does that make sense? Like where there's lots of other guys who could have like, so it's like the Nets just happen to have like one of these specific kind of archetypal guys, and then so every 2 guard shot creator,
non-shooting big.
That's what I mean. Like, it's gonna be like Cam Thomas, and that's just not necessarily fair. Okay, we'll roll through. Yeah, sorry, got some YouTubers coming in here. Just a reminder, if you're popping into YouTube, Adam is shaky and walking around because he's backstage at the draft right now. In the media, I think he's doing a little dance here, trying to avoid other media members. You know, there's a lot of, I mean, how many media people were you say? I mean, would you say lots and lots, or like are you navigating your way through hordes of them?
Yeah, we're doing hundreds. We're doing like 100. You know, there's a bullpen of about 150 or so, and then there's people down on the main floor, and people are coming and going. And I keep trying to do this thing where I just turn my angle the other way, and hopefully no one notices. Yeah, it's all good.
People walk through the back, man. That's you. You're catching. They can catch a stray here, but don't worry about keeping everyone off camera. They know what they got to do. Everyone wants to be. Everyone got there because they want to be on camera. Believe me, these are media members with massive egos. They want to be on. They want to be on camera. They love it, even if it's just by accident. Okay, so if you're just jumping into the live stuff, just Adam's shaky and a little crazy because he's backstage at Barclays at the NBA draft covering this stuff live. Make sure you're following him at Adam Armbrecht. You can see it down there at the bottom on Twitter. He's been just throwing out a bunch of stuff, and he'll be there live reaction later. Okay, so Keontae George, we hit him. Let me roll through a couple more guys. Nick Smith Jr., we talked a little bit about him. Plus 2,600 to land in the top 10. That feels really unlikely here, but he feels like he's kind of into this range. Not a guy that you and I talked a ton about leading into the draft, but has been projected a few spots to the Nets. Thoughts on Nick Smith real quick?
I think I'm fine with it. Again, like you say, because we didn't focus in on him. It has some sense of, as you go through the draft process, maybe you start to wane on a particular player. Maybe it's fine, but I for some reason, and correct me if you disagree, or tell me if you disagree. Once a player settles down into a group of guys that were all living in that 20 to 25 range, or 18 to 23 range, I'm more inclined to take the guy that's been consistently there. I mentioned this about a player like Anthony Black when I talked to him yesterday at Media Day, right? He's lived in the top 10. He's lived around number 8. Even guys that have lived around 11 or 12, you just feel like there is a confidence in what that player is going to be. Or whether or not it's other prospects moving ahead of Nick Smith Jr. or him specifically, there's something about it that has taken him down and behind several other guards on the board too, right? He went from being third, fourth on the list of guards to now you're talking about him being 7th or 8th. There has to be something to that you've learned through the combine process and some of the workouts.
Yeah, the shooting was rough at Arkansas. It's really, really, really inefficient, which is tough, man. If you're going to come in as not an oversized guard and you're still worried about the shooting, I think you are possibly running into a danger zone. Like, the shooting was bad, and he didn't really pass it all either. And so now you're talking about a guy where it's like you might have to start telling yourself a lot of different stories about it. I think that's part of the reason we've seen Nick Smith drop here. I think still people are firmly believing in the upside, which I can be totally fine with at pick 21. Like, if you think the athleticism is there, if you think it's just going to be sort of like off-ball guard, he'll get the shots, but it's like combo guard stuff, and you'll kind of work out the rest of it. The wingspan's definitely there. Looks like the defense is going to play. So I can see it, but I can also see, I get a little concerned with these guards where you're already if there's a bunch of question marks about the offense early for a guard, that's a trouble zone. All right. Well,
let's move to the next one, but also note that some of the comments here are questioning my state right now. Yeah, it's hot. All right. There's a lot going on in here. This is
buddy, this guy, Adam's doing the podcast. We're 25 minutes into the podcast. He's been on the move the whole time, and he's synthesizing draft stuff around these different guys. I can handle some of these dudes too, by the way, because I think we're going to be okay. Jaime Jaquez has been a guy projected. He's really moved up the draft board. He was been projected to the Warriors, but they might have just ended up trading that pick for the CP3 Jordan Poole deal. I have to double check that one. Heat have been projected there for Jaime. Coming out of UCLA, big dude, senior, definitely trends a little older, but it looks like he has all sort of the prerequisite makeup stuff that you want to see. Any quick thoughts on Jaquez? I can go a little bit further into him if he were to drop.
Yeah, now there's a couple other names that I looked at. You can go check my Twitter timeline. I mentioned specifically when we start to think about him as a player. There's other guys that aren't as high up on the board in the first round there that I'd be as comfortable with, specifically the same general type of skill set. So I probably would be a pass for me. Or if that's took him at 21 or 22, I wouldn't be disappointed, but it would certainly feel like there was other better options on the board.
Can get into the lane, can create his own shot, was at UCLA forever. So again, he's like going to push up to 23 years old here, which is definitely getting on the older side. Probably will be able to shoot. Unclear about how much he's actually going to shoot. I mean, he's listed as a guard, but he didn't really always play like one. Again, pretty big dude, not crazy athletic, but pretty cerebral on the court. I can see why, again, he was a guy like the Heat would like, right? It's like, okay, it doesn't jump off the page at you, but could you mold him into a system that you already have really strong belief in? Yeah, I think Jaime Jaquez would fit the bill there. I think actually he'll come in and play real NBA minutes like almost right away, but I don't think the ceiling's not super high, and I'm not sure the Nets should be drafting for floor at this point, although they might end up doing that. So Jaquez, I'm gonna say I think I'd be fine with it. I actually do think he goes before this, though. It's interesting. Like he's a dude that's really, really climbed as the draft has moved forward. Okay, Chris Murray, guy we talked about a bunch. He's still kind of living in this 18 to 25 zone. Keegan Murray's brother, coming out of Iowa, another older dude pressing up toward 23 years old. Thoughts? I mean, I don't know if we need to relitigate Chris Murray here. Thoughts if Chris Murray landed at 21-22?
No, don't like it.
Okay, yeah. And just you can go back and listen to a bunch of other podcasts that we've done in the past here on Chris Murray. Just talking a little too old, little too one-dimensional. Neither of us are believers that what he was getting away with at the college level, which came on late, was mostly probably, I think, just because of age, time, and system, and not really because of overall athleticism. I'm actually still shocked that he's projected this high, but he does have stuff that, like, 6'9", good wingspan, can shoot threes. Like every team does kind of need a guy like that. So I can still see why this feels like if you're like a Miami or a Lakers or something like that, who's like trying to win now, Chris Murray can probably step in and play real minutes for you. I don't think the Nets are going to do it. We'll roll through a couple more. How much more time do you have there? Are you good to go here for a little bit longer? Or?
Actually, probably at this point, I can go for a couple more minutes, but I won't be able to go down. I successfully navigated up 2 flights of stairs while we were doing this, so I'm officially up near the suite somewhere. So I just need to keep myself well clear of the draft floor after 7 o'clock. So I'll be here.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, we'll hang in here, and you can jump off here. We'll do a couple more dudes. You can jump off. I might hang for a few minutes here, do a couple extra questions. If people want to throw questions here into Locked On Nets, we'll definitely be coming here after. At least one of us will be here. But if you'll have a couple pre-draft questions, I'll probably end up hanging around for a few extra minutes because we got some time before the draft. All right, couple more dudes in this range. Leonard Miller. Leonard Miller's a guy projected to the Nets in a few spots here, not as many, but a guy that's kind of risen and fallen over this time. We did a specific draft episode about Leonard Miller. If Leonard Miller's name is called, how are you feeling?
Actually, I come around on it a little bit. I actually think that, we talk about guys that he easily showcased that he can be a little bit of a versatile big. He can space the floor a little bit for you. We know that the Nets need that. And there aren't necessarily a ton of guys that we would talk about being bulk, being bigger, being more physical presence, right? A lot of the guys we're talking about is getting some wing play and getting some backcourt guys. So if he falls here, you at least know that you've improved what you have with Nicholas Claxton, Day'Ron Sharpe. That's effectively the only thing you have in your front court to bring some real value. So I wouldn't mind it, actually, if he fell here.
I feel pretty excited about this one. I think this is the kind of guy I think we can probably dream a little on the upside. He'd be a functional wing replacement right away. Still a little bit on the younger side, but that's all right. And this is a guy that's really, hey, Jackson Gatlin, Locked On Rockets, who owns,
what's up, guys?
Who owns all the Nets picks.
Guy after we ran into a little, some technical difficulties earlier.
Yeah, well, so we're excited because it's the last.
The best options here at 21 and 22 right now.
Okay, well, I'm not going to detract from that too much, but don't target any of the picks that the Rockets might trade for with pick 20, okay?
That's it.
Stay off our turf, guys.
Jackson still doing victory laps around the Nets, or the Rockets owning most of the Nets draft capital from here on out. So annoying. Don't really like seeing him. Tell him that you can, if you want to kick him off of, a balcony or something like that, no one would be crying into any kind of drink. Okay, I'd be excited for Leonard Miller. Last guy, Dariq Whitehead. We talked at length about him at previous podcasts. A guy who the biggest question here is like sort of what was going on at Duke and if the foot is going to be okay. Yeah. His orthopedic surgeon is the Nets team doctor. They got an in-house, probably hopefully clean bill of health here. Dariq Whitehead has been mocked here a few times. How would you feel if this guy coming out of Duke was called?
Specifically because, the Nets team's doctors have looked at him. If they gave him a clean bill of health, then I actually think, and we talked about this at the time, if he was 100% healthy coming out, you probably look at him going a little bit higher in the draft here. So the idea of 21 or 22, he's mid-20s right now. I think you'd say, yeah, the Nets just looked at that 4-pick value and said it's perfectly fine to take him, has the prerequisite skill sets. He's a day one contributor, and the Nets are certainly going to need that.
If they drafted him, I'm gonna let Adam get out here in a second. If they drafted Whitehead, I'd feel great about the medicals because again, it's like they're right in house. They're right in house on the medicals. All right, you get out of here. I will hang around in live. I'll answer some questions. I got a bunch of people in here. If you have questions, throw them into the chat. I see a couple guys I'm going to respond to already. Adam, I think are you going to be you're going to be tweeting the whole time? I'm sure. What else are you going to be doing while you're there, and you can get out of here?
I'm trying to be active. Going to be down, obviously, watching the picks as they come in. We'll get into the green room or the interview rooms after they get picked. So especially around 21 and 22, if that's where the Nets stay, I'll be in the room. Hopefully, get a couple questions in and be able to highlight why the Nets chose to go with the players that they did, or a breaking trade. We'll come back in and cover that as well.
All right, man. Great stuff. Adam Armbrecht holding it down for Locked On Nets live at the NBA draft. We'll continue going through. Make sure Adam. Oh, okay. It switched our things. I knew that was going to happen. Sorry, we'll be a little confusing here with the way the layout goes. Maybe I can switch this real fast as we're on the fly. Adam's usually the one. There we go. Do that, and we'll do that. Adam's usually the one that's able to hold this stuff down a little harder on the technical side. So when you're rolling through both the handling the live YouTube, we'll zoom in a little bit here. When you're handling live YouTube and where you're handling all the other stuff, got to just make sure you're on the fly and you're doing everything correctly. Really appreciate everyone that's jumped in here into the chat. People kind of have a bunch of opinions. Really exciting time. News is going to be flying in, trying to manage just kind of keeping abreast of everything that's happening just with rumors. Doesn't seem like there's been tons of stuff that's come in since we recorded, but this, again, these things can be, a walk and then a sprint when it comes to news. Want to touch on a few other dudes that have been mentioned here in the chat. If you have specific guys that you want me to comment on, I'll do my best. I can see people jumped in. We talked, guys that Adam and I talked about. We talked about Dariq Whitehead briefly, Leonard Miller, Brandon Podziemski. We talked about Olivia Maxence Prosper. We talked about Chris Murray, Jaime Jaquez, Keontae George, a bunch of different names. We did not get to Jet Howard, another guy that's been projected in and around the Nets range, has been mocked to the Nets. Look, with Howard, we talked about him a bunch yesterday. Could definitely see the Nets taking him here. Will be able to come in and play offense nearly day one. And the defense was really pretty bad at Michigan, right? So, there's some pretty brutal on-court, off-court stuff for him when it comes to the defensive measurements, or the defensive metrics. But sometimes with that, it's like a little, what to make of it. You're a little bit worried about it, but the pedigree's there. The size and the other measurables are there. Obviously, the family and stuff, that's all there for Jet Howard. I've kind of gone back and forth on him as sort of this has gone on. He's climbed as high as 14 at times. He's back down to 25 in some spots. I don't really know sort of what to think about where Jet Howard is going to land, although I wouldn't be shocked if he was a name the Nets did end up calling around that time. So Jet Howard is another dude. I think that was all the guys that I wanted to hit on. Jordan Hawkins, I saw him, but I don't think he falls enough. James Nagy, I could see him kind of getting in around there, but we'll see. Ryan Repair, he's kind of dropped a little bit in the latest mocks. I'm not sure that's where the Nets end up going. He's in some places dropped down into the 30s. So I don't know if the Nets are going to reach on this specific guy, even though he was a dude that felt like he was maybe landing in the Nets range for a little while. But as the latest news comes out, I don't think that's going to be there. Other stuff wanted to touch on. I did see a Derek Lively mention. I actually bet earlier in the day, I need to do a roundup here on where I landed with this because I had it in front of me. I did bet Derek Lively to go top 10 here at plus odds. I don't have it on me now. I'll have to bring it back up here, and I don't know where I put it. But I did bet Derek Lively. I think he ends up going top 10. I think it was just a little bit of a long shot kind of stuff, but his name is gaining some real traction in around here. I think that there's a sense that he could what's it saying? Fulfill a real athletic like upside here. And if you watch some of the tape on him, obviously like the reach is insane, the size is huge, the athleticism is off the charts. The numbers really weren't there at Duke, but we've seen guys like if you just have these kind of measurables, you can't teach a 7'7" wingspan with insane motor. So if Lively actually jumped into the top 10 here, one for the old bank account, I would love to see it. But if I could definitely end up seeing that happen. Like, I don't, who he could end up here, like at the Jazz, maybe, probably not. Like if he ends up maybe at the Mavericks, or if the Mavericks trade out of the 10 pick, which could end up happening here before it's all said and done. I could see that happening. So I definitely saw a Derek Lively mention in here. I think I saw someone that was mentioned that Derek Lively would drive me crazy. I just don't, well, one, I don't think he's going to get down there. Two, he's the kind of guy they already can't play with a guy like Claxton. So I think like development might be a trouble with him. And so we'll see on that, but I don't think that's that's going to end up being the case. We're about 45 minutes until the draft gets underway. Nets probably pick like 9:15, something like that when it's all said and done, maybe a little bit later. So as a programming note, after the Nets picks, we'll probably wait till both are in, or if the Nets end up making some kind of move that pushes them up in the draft or down and out of the draft, we'll jump on live. I'm not gonna do a live all the way through the draft. I just don't actually have the bandwidth to be able to pull that off, and do kind of want to enjoy a little bit of the draft as it unfolds, because there's a bunch of different stuff that's just kind of going on with this draft. That's just going to be fascinating to watch. All right, try to answer a couple questions here. What's the best point guard the Nets could realistically get, assuming they can move up, possibly get the Raptors, Mavs or Raptors picks? Look, Kason Wallace is a guy that people have talked about, and I know there's been Nets fandom that has wanted to jump in to try to climb up to get this guy specifically. I don't think this is going to be a Marks kind of move. There has been talk that they would want to move up in the draft. I would kind of be shocked if this was the guy, but if you thought that this was a point guard that you could get in that like 10, 11, 12, 13 range, Kason will almost definitely be there. So is that the right move? I'm not really sure, but that's probably the guy that I could see end up if they were able to trade up for like a prototypical kind of point guard guy. Kason probably is the dude. I'm also, if you're asking questions, I'm gonna keep this to like mostly draft questions now. I see people kind of posting other Nets centric questions. We'll handle those all during the week and on some other stuff. So I'm not trying to ignore any questions here, but trying to keep it just related to the draft. Again, trying to monitor news as we go, have a bunch of the alert stuff on, have a bunch of just the different accounts, just kind of make sure we're just not going to have anything slip by us here. Got the draft on in the background. Obviously, again, Adam is at the draft, so he's holding it down there. Want to roll through a few more things here before we go. Let me go through a couple more dudes that had been sort of like mentioned in this area. Bryce Sensabaugh is another dude coming out of Ohio State. His draft stock has been all over the place over the last couple of weeks. He had been mocked, I believe, in the teens for a little while. He's dropped to the 20s in some spots, even to the 30s in some places. Like, I'm not really sure sort of what to make of when we see this kind of insane movement around dudes like this. Probably a little bit a worry that it's just kind of like score or bust. I'm not exactly sure what would have precipitated a big drop for him. In some ways feels like a guy that Marks could want to draft. The shooting is definitely good. The catch and shoot stuff's definitely good. And so you like him for that. Maybe you think that he's going to be able to work off ball. Okay, fine with that. There's been some injury stuff in his past. I don't know. I can see why that he's dropped a little bit, but that's probably a name that we're going to want to take this off. There's probably a name that we're going to want to keep an eye on as the draft unfolds, because I could definitely see that dude being a name that they call. We mentioned Nick Smith, we mentioned Derek. Noah Clowney. Noah Clowney is another guy. This is a guy that has also been mocked into the Nets range. He's kind of gone anywhere from like 18 to like 26 or 27 right now on FanDuel. Minus 230 for Noah Clowney to go in the top 20. So that would put him as a favorite to land before the Nets actually drafted. We talked about Clowney on a previous episode. I was a little worried again, like I've mentioned a few other times with some of these guys that that there might be sort of like a not one dimensional kind of state of his game, but like, was the shooting ever going to come around? He did take threes at Alabama. They did not go in, right? So, and it wasn't like he shot the free throws well either, which we know we're always going to look for when it comes to trying to project some of the shooting. Clowney's a guy though, like, kind of can jump off the page for you on defense, can definitely rim run. And so there's probably a sense that some of those things are going to be able to translate to the NBA level. I'm not sure like the crazy high elite upside is there with him, but again, you can't teach size and athleticism. And if you're starting with those things, 6'10", 7'2" wingspan, if you're starting with that kind of stuff, you can definitely tell yourself a story about it. Maybe you think that Noah Clowney is a guy that can come in and help some of the Nets rebounding issues. Look, we talked a lot about rebounding over the last couple of years and their lack of it, right? They're just like, they're getting absolutely punished on the boards time and time again, sort of anytime except when Day'Ron Sharp's on the court and he's got his own functional issues. So if you think that, that's just such a core need for the Nets at this point, then you want to talk yourself into a guy like Clowney. Again, the odds do say that he's going to be gone before the Nets pick, but it's not like it's some kind of overwhelming favorite to have that happen. So I think that's probably a realistic, I think that's actually, it's a realistic name that we can see called. And I actually meant to mention that one to Adam before. Let me hit a couple more on the way out here. I think Nets are gonna draft a point guard or point forward center. I actually have I don't think they're gonna draft a point guard, mostly because I don't think there's enough good point guards landing in this range. So I don't think that's what they're going to do. Now you might say to yourself, well, are they going into the season with not enough point guards? Yes, like Spencer Dinwiddie and question mark is sort of the point guard situation with this team. I would not still be in the mode of just drafting a point guard just because I didn't have enough on the roster. I don't think the Nets, I've been really vocal about this. I don't think the Nets are in an organizational state where drafting for need for this coming season makes any sense at all. And there are not a lot of like sort of pure point guard talents in the Nets drafting range right now. So if I had to guess, I would say it's going to go more like wing/power forward, not center. I don't think they're going to be drafting a center here or like a strict center, but if I guess maybe you want to say OMP is a strict center. So maybe I take that back a little bit, but there's some hope that he's going to be able to turn what he's able to do into being able to shoot on the court. I know that at times that did not look all that great, but obviously if you draft Olivier Maxence Prosper, you're hoping that he can end up being there. It looks 6'8". He does project more as a pure 4 than a 5. So maybe I would say ends up being like more like a wing/power forward that the Nets draft over a point guard. And I think that was it. Anything else before we get out of here? Okay. So yeah, I think I'm going to jump out of here. Been going at this for about 45 minutes. Last thing. We talked about this at the beginning. I don't think a trade for Dame is happening here before the draft or even during the draft. Maybe it ends up happening in the future for the Nets, but I don't think that the Dame stuff is going to happen here. That would be quite the bombshell. We're about 40 minutes till the draft starts. So again, anything could be happening, but I don't think that we're going to see, I don't think we're going to see a Dame trade before that happens. But look, they end up drafting, Miller or Scoot, and he gets in. I don't think he's just too good of a dude. He's not going to say it here right at the moment. I think he's going to let this play out a little bit. I think there's definitely a sense from Dame that he doesn't want to be like the bad guy here, which I don't think anyone would blame him for requesting a trade at this point. It does look like from where the odds are going that Scoot Henderson is going to be drafted at 3 and Brandon Miller is going to be drafted at 2. I don't know. Look, drafting another point guard. What does that tell Dame? I don't know, man. This is a crazy situation. So stranger things and all, but I just don't think this story is going to play itself out tonight when it comes to Damian Lillard. Okay. Really appreciate everyone that jumped in here. Again, 7:20 right now, about an hour. The draft will be going starting at 8 p.m. Eastern. Nets at 21 and 22, assuming they don't draft. Maybe we're looking 9:15, 9:30, have some other network commitments that I need to fulfill to make sure that we get some of that stuff out the door once the Nets draft. But after that, we'll be jumping in to do a live podcast. I believe we'll be doing a live podcast. I have to try to just do that at the last second, but we'll make sure that Adam's all set up as he goes through media day. Really appreciate everyone that has jumped in here. Thanks for hanging in, Nets Nation. This is really, really exciting time. This is the most fun time of year. I mean, if they can't be on the court, let's do some drafting and some trading, man. That's as exciting as it gets. We'll be back again later on tonight talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.